Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back to the show. We are excited to have our next guest joining us here, Isaiah D. Cooper, joining us, hailing from close by, actually, New Haven, Connecticut. He's an attorney and owner of his own company, and again, Cooper Law. He's the founder and principal owner, and he's here to talk more about the work that he does with negotiating, documenting purchase, sale of businesses, assets, capital structures, shareholders, ownership agreements. I mean, he does a lot, and helping those, draft up and negotiate draft debt finance and so much more. So Cooper Law is the name of the company. How can we reach you?
Well, the best way to reach me is
the email,
via
right?
email at icooper@cooperlaw.net or by telephone at area code 203-233-4547.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for being here. Would you mind just telling us a little bit about what it is you do? And then we'll get right into talking about, purchasing and sales of companies. So just give us a quick overview for new time viewers and listeners today.
Well, I am a business attorney. I think of myself as a transactional attorney. I started my practice in New York City at what was a small New York City firm with only 75 attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a tax attorney when I started out. And I didn't really want to be a tax attorney, but that was what was available. They gave me an offer which was either tax or corporate, depending on what the need was when the fall of my first year started, and it ended up being tax. I'm happy I did it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really want to be a tax attorney. I didn't want to be a tax attorney for the rest of my life, because that would have meant I would have been buried in the tax code and regulations. I mean, some people refer to the tax code as the full employment for attorneys statute, because it's so complicated that no one could know it all. But it was great experience to get, because it was transactional work that I was doing there. And since moving to Connecticut many years ago already, I have been moving from being a tax attorney. Well, I mean, the first 5 years, maybe I was moving from being a tax attorney to being a transactional attorney. And I'm happy to be a transactional attorney. To give you a sense of what I'm working on today, I have a client who is selling a software that is focused. The software provides assistance to people who are running political campaigns to raise capital. And my client who developed this software is selling it to another person I know who has a company, has been involved in politics, and is looking to be able to use this software. So that's one transaction today. The thing I was working on before we got on the phone, there's an organization in this area that is called Home Haven Villages, and they provide village environments for older retiring people who want to stay in their homes, helping them to stay in their homes. And I'm helping them to review a new lease because they're moving their offices.
Thank you.
So being a business attorney, reviewing, for years, my clients had wanted me to do a number of things beyond what I did, but I've always been reviewing leases for my clients who were in one space or another. So, yeah.
Well, you've done a lot, you've accomplished a lot, and still continue to do. And I want to ask you one of these questions about the purchase or sale of a company, right? Should it be structured as a purchase of stock or other equity interest, or as the sale of the assets of the company? How do you figure this all out?
Well, generally, the golden rule applies. When someone wants to buy a company, the person with the money, the person with the gold in this instance, gets to decide the structure of the transaction. And generally, a buyer wants to buy the assets of the company. They don't want to buy stock of the company. The company could be a stock corporation or an LLC, but if the buyer buys the stock or the LLC interests, they don't know all of the history of the company. You know, if you've worked in the company for the life of the company, you know all of the history of the company. I mean, I know all of the history of Cooper Law LLC, my firm, intimately. And if I tried to sell my firm, I could tell someone about it, but a buyer is not going to want to learn all of that. They want to just get the assets. Unfortunately, with law practices, the only thing that's worth anything in my firm is my clients and my abilities. So no one's going to buy my practice. But if I were in a big firm, some of that might be transferable because I would have other people working with me on these various transactions and would know my clients and be able to take over for me at that point. But um, my firm is not particularly saleable, but for most business firms and someone who forms a service company as an LLC, they might be able to sell the LLC interest, but the buyer generally wants the assets, whatever the assets, the critical assets are. So they want to buy assets. Don't want to buy stock or LLC interest, because with stock and LLC interest, there could be some hidden transaction or some terrible thing they did 20 years ago that's going to come back to haunt them. So they don't want all of that if they
Yeah.
can just buy the assets with nothing attached to them, or maybe if there's financing for the deal is the only attachment and they know about that, but that's new, then they're willing to buy, the assets with maybe some financing attached to it. But they don't want to buy unknown assets or an unknown company without, and not have the whole history of the company be available. I mean, unless the company has an enormous number of long-term employees who know everything, and even then, you never know if they're going to stay. So a buyer doesn't really want to get the company, they want to get the assets that the company does business with. Those are the keys to the business. So
Wow.
generally,
Okay.
any sort of acquisition is going to be structured as an asset transaction, not as a stock transaction
Got it.
or other equity interests.
Great. Well, would you mind sharing how the golden rule, shall we say, applies to the purchase or sale
Well,
of a company?
that is the golden rule.
That
The
is,
person
yeah.
with the gold gets to make the rules, So
Mm-hmm.
buyer who has the money is going to say, yeah, I'm not buying the stock, I'm just buying the assets. So
Got it.
it's not the golden rule that you learned when you were a kid. It's a golden rule as it applies to transactional practice.
Got it. And can you enlighten us on how maybe an entrepreneur can maximize the value of his or her company before selling it? What are some of the things that he or she can do?
Well, that's a good question. Entrepreneurs who get into business, sometimes they get into business, there's something that they like to do and they're doing it and they're good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they grow, and as they grow, they learn more different things that they can do in their business. But sometimes it's that entrepreneur who's wearing 10 different hats, who is the chief financial officer, who is fixing the equipment, who is deciding on new equipment, who's deciding how to upgrade the equipment, hiring all of the personnel and all like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that entrepreneur has too many hats, and that makes the company not particularly saleable.
Yeah.
However, if a company wants to be saleable, they can hire and train excellent personnel to do all the different jobs that entrepreneur might have once done. As they grow, the entrepreneur would be smart to hire
Mm-hmm.
excellent staff and have that staff know everything about what has to happen in this area. So the personnel director has to know everything about the history of all of the employees. And the manufacturing director has to know everything about the history of the manufacturing facility and the history of all the machines that are used to put together whatever they're putting together. I mean, if it's a biological company, there's going to be laboratory equipment and mixing equipment of various sorts. It all depends on the type of the company. If it's a sales company, if it's a series of stores, well, you're going to have display cases and you're going to have personnel and you're going to
Yeah.
have storage areas or warehouses where you keep the products that you're selling. I mean, big, like if you think of like Kohl's, which is a big chain of department stores,
yeah.
they don't have enormous warehousing space in each store. They have
True.
some, storage space in the back of the store, but most of their stock is out on the floor.
I could
But
imagine, yeah.
they have real estate, they have
Mm-hmm.
the lease for the space where they are, or they own the building where the store is, and they have all of this display equipment to show that stuff, and they have relationships with the suppliers who are making all of the clothes that they sell in their stores and that's a whole myriad of different
Yeah.
suppliers, because there are different suppliers for infant clothing and children's clothing, and for men's clothing and women's clothing, and there's a different suppliers for dress clothing for
Yeah.
women and dress clothing for men. So you have to know all of those agreements in order to make it work. So the more you hire particular people to be in charge of all these different areas of the business. So that's,
Yeah.
I talked about a retail chain, but if it's a manufacturing company, there's going to be a manufacturing facility, and there may be 20
Mm-hmm.
different pieces of equipment that help do a different piece of the manufacturing, putting different parts that go into the main product together, and then different pieces of machinery that will be packing them into boxes that can be shipped to their buyers. So someone has to be in charge of all that, and the person owning the company, if they grow into it and they got into it early on in their life, and then they expanded it and it grew in various ways, often they're wearing too many hats.
Yeah.
And the more they find different employees who can take over the different areas of the company and stay with the company's value goes way up with those sorts of, head of
Got it.
operations, head of manufacturing, head of maintenance, so all of separating out all of those tasks
Yeah.
and having top-notch individuals filling those roles, so that the buyer doesn't have to fill all those roles and wear all those different hats, makes
it.
the company much more saleable.
Perfect. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, Isaiah.
Oh,
Remind us how we can reach out to you. I know we got a late start again. Hopefully, next week we'll be
okay.
on time and we can definitely chat a lot longer. But if someone's interested in reaching out for your services, would you mind providing the email address one more time?
Email address is icooper@cooperlaw.net, and phone is 203-233-4547.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, and looking forward to our next conversation. Thank you again. Okay.
All right.
Enjoy the rest of
Take
your
care.
day. Stay warm.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the mytuner-radio, online radio box, and simpleradio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.